Joining us now, all the way from Ireland, praise be to God, is Mr. Nugent. He has a YouTube channel that I found not all that long ago, really, and I've been really enjoying it. Decree be determined to be Catholic. Good morning to you, sir. Thank you for being on with us.
Thanks very much, Joe. It's a pleasure to join you this morning.
I've been enjoying your YouTube channel, your content there. We'll be linking to it on our live video feeds today, but I want to talk about Ireland in particular. You just celebrated a very grotesque anniversary of abortion in your country. Now, I've never been to Ireland, so yes, I have some heritage in that regard. But nonetheless, outside looking in, we always think of Ireland from a Catholic perspective, and St. Patrick, of course, and we think, how is this possible? Like, we're a bunch of pagan heathens, that much we know. But how is it possible for Catholic Ireland to fall so far? What is it like from your perspective?
In Ireland at the moment, many people will remember that we had, unlike many other countries, unlike the US, in Ireland, we had a popular vote on abortion. And we were kind of surprised when we went out, started canvassing back in 2018, knocking on doors and seeing statues of Padre Pio, and then people saying, well, I support abortion because my local priest says, look, you can follow your conscience and all this. And we became clear that decades of bad catechesis, because I wasn't catechized in the 1980s, and so many of my peers, decades of bad catechesis, bad formation, has just led to Catholics not understanding and knowing their faith. That's simply what's happened in Ireland over the last number of years, because we moved from the 1960s and 1970s, where all of the faith formation was done by priests and religious in schools. In the 60s and 70s, there would have been Christian Brothers and all of these different religious schools run by religious. They left the scene, and in the 80s, 90s, and so on, it's been run by laity that are supposed to teach the faith, but it's really bad. So that's simply where we are. It's a sad lack of leadership, and obviously the abuse scandals over the last 30 years, that since the early 1990s, that has really hammered the morale of bishops and priests who are simply afraid to teach us the truth, to speak up about the truth, and to stand for the faith. And this has really led to the decimation of the Catholic Church in Ireland. We have 4 seminarians out of a population of 4 seminarians that entered last year. There's about 10 seminarians that left Ireland to go to traditional seminaries. So that's just in the last year. There was going to be 5, but because they were demanding that they get a certain treatment, medical treatment last year, one seminarian said, look, I prefer not to have that treatment to go into seminary, and he wasn't allowed in. So that'll give you an idea where we are at the moment in Ireland.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing to know. I mean, Joe has mentioned this already. Catholic Ireland, we have this idea, everybody's Catholic there. The faith is a stronghold there. But I'm thinking about the lockdowns that happened recently and how that affected the faith of so many people, where they made Mass something that was not obligatory, that was not something as important as keeping a store open, for example. In your experience, how is the faith surviving after having the churches been locked down for so long?
Yeah, so we had a very strange experience. Never thought I'd see this in my lifetime. In 2020, March, everything closed, churches closed, they stopped giving public masses. And we thought for March, for a couple of weeks, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, we all remember that. We thought, okay, look, we'll survive 2 to 3 weeks and let it go. But it kind of trickled on April, May, June. And then in July 2020, the government kind of relaxed it a little bit so that we could have Mass. And our local parish priest here, he said, he sent us out a letter saying, look, I'm not going to start saying Mass publicly yet because I need more time to understand the regulations and so forth. Even though we were all working in factories here and working 12-hour shifts and 8-hour shifts in our factories, we couldn't go to Mass. This was the sad reality. So we started traveling to Mass in other places. We I wrote to a bishop I knew, and I said, look, this is the situation he's in and we're in. And he said, look, nobody's going to criticize you or judge you if you're going to, say, the society is supposed to attend for mass, which we did. You know, and like, either do we fight for the faith or we don't. You know, my children will look back and said, look, I brought my kids to mass. So like, it's a kind of, all of these problems we seem to have had in previous years, because, you know, I loved the church. I don't want to divide the church. I don't want to be causing division, but, you know, we have to have the mass. And a group of men that I knew, we built our own chapel, literally an underground chapel. And so we had about 24 priests that would rotate saying mass. Now, I can't say anything about this chapel, where it is or who are the priests, because bishops would just, you know, come down too hard on them. But these were great men of faith, especially one elderly priest. He was in his 80s. He smokes a lot. He had kind of he wouldn't have had, but he was such an amazing priest. He's still alive.
Praise
didn't
be
get
to
COVID,
God.
didn't die.
Yeah.
And I think he was saying, look, if I'm going to die of COVID, I'll go out dying. I'll die saying the mass. And, you know, he gave great example. And so there is pockets of good faith. There are lots of good families, but Ireland is more new age now. That's the spirituality that pervades Ireland. You know, mindfulness and meditation and yoga. That's really, you know,
is it new age or is it old age? That's one of the questions in my mind. You know, I feel like the world is going back to its pagan roots. Essentially, we're seeing it almost every culture. Where they're turning back to sort of this paganism with a new motif slapped on the cover. And, you know, I'm thinking about the two societies that have fallen so far. Montreal and Quebec has gone like 90% in the last 100 years. You know, it was like stellar, 99, 100% Catholic, and now it's barely a blip on the radar. And Ireland is going down the same way. Poland is also declining these days. It also has a good reputation for being Catholic, and it is utterly tragic. But one of your latest videos, you talked about Ireland's psychic epidemic, and that made me think about the question, is abortion the opiate of the masses? To turn that phrase on its head a little bit. You know, religion is the opiate of the masses. I think abortion really is, because how else do you see so many mobs of people chanting, cheering, elated, beside themselves with joy over the right to end human life?
I mean, I suppose we couldn't understand it. You know, I'm a father. I have children. As I said, I looked at my children when you know, after 3 months scan. We named our children in the womb. We knew the sex. You know, we heavily identified with that beautiful person in the womb. And during one of our one pregnancy, our daughter, my wife had an illness, and they said, well, in normal circumstances in other countries, you'd be recommended to abort this baby because she would be born with defects and so forth. Now, there was not a chance we would even consider it, and at the time it was illegal in Ireland, but that's what the doctors were saying at the time, kind of nudge, you can go to England and get sorted if you don't want to continue. But that's really where we are, and my daughter's perfectly healthy. She has nothing wrong with her. And but you know, this is the sad situation where we are. I mean, all during that campaign, guys. Hold that
thought. Robert, welcome back to the show. Real quick, before we jump back into the conversation, you're a tour guide of some kind? You're like a Catholic tour guide? Like, what is it you do?
Okay, so I work, my day job, I work for an American multinational. I won't say their name on the radio, but I work in supply chain. And in my pastime, my son and myself, he's 12 years old, we've been walking across Spain. So we are a tour guide in the sense that as we walk across, we pick up people from all over the world. A lot of Americans, actually, that we've known.
No doubt.
And so it's our amateur pastime. We're walking from Fatima next month up to Santiago de Compostela.
Oh, how wonderful. Praise be to God. If someone wanted to be their official Santiago tour guide, would you be open to that?
Absolutely, I'd be more than happy if they want to come along. So if they go to my channel, my email's there, and just reach out to me if
Got
that's
it.
something they're interested in.
Decreevy determined to be Catholic. Again, we'll link to it. But let's jump back in. In that video, before the break, you were starting to get into this. So you played these clips of this crowd just really beside themselves, happy for the right to kill human beings, you know, this Moloch worship. It is very disturbing to see that.
Yeah, it is. And a part of that video that people didn't miss is that you have the celebrations, and also you have the music, which the title of that music is Black Mass, because abortion is the anti-sacrament. It is the anti-sacrament. It is the destruction of life, the destruction of the most precious. Without the right to life, without the simple acknowledgement that the child has value, where are we going as a society? And it was always harped on, oh, look, people are traveling for abortions. But the reality is, guys, we went from 2,000 abortions a year to 6,666 abortions.
Wow.
And there's a friend of mine, he's wrote a book called The Gentle Traditionalist, Roger Buck. And he goes into a lot of the problems that are faced in Ireland, and he's kind of dissected them down, and we've been talking about this. And so that quote that I have, that psychic epidemic, you know, really comes from Roger and his inspiration, his books and so forth, because he's looking at the problems that we're facing in Ireland. You know, how is it that we've come so far, and what's the next step? The next step obviously be euthanasia, and we have all of the woke culture that's invading Ireland. But I do see a lot of hope. It's not like I don't want to make people depressed. There's a lot of hope, because you see people realizing this has gone so far, this project, that they're sensing that something is deeply wrong in this maneuver to really destroy the humanity, to destroy society. I mean, if we can't value the child in the womb, where are we going as our future? Do you know?
You know, it's fascinating for me. I love history. I do that in my pastime. I read history books. America has never been a Catholic country. It was barely tolerated in our colonial days. It got better over time, praise be to God. I would say we're more Catholic now than we've ever have been in history, and we got tons of problems here, obviously. Whereas Ireland, as we've already spoken of, it's synonymous. Like, everyone from the outside thinks of Ireland as Catholic, even still to this day, even though it's simply not true. So I bring this up to ask the question, unlike in America, I take the premise that it is impossible to vote an ethical society into office. It's like, it's not going to happen. You're not going to vote and get the reign of Mary, okay? In Ireland, though, is it still possible for your vote to have an impact on a religious and spiritual level?
No, not. There's not simply a chance that will happen at this moment in time. None of the parties have a majority to bring back Catholic values into Ireland. It's simply there 90% or 85% of those in our parliament would not support. 85% of those in our parliament support abortion, and a whole platter of other areas that are against the faith. In the US, you stand a little bit more of a chance of that. When I was doing my channel, I was doing my research for my channel, I traveled around the US. I traveled to Huntsville, Alabama, to Shrine of the Blessed Sacrament. And you do see in America, there's a lot more dynamics. There's a lot more living, vibrant Catholic parishes, beautiful area. We come back to Ireland and try and bring this here, where everybody in quotes is Catholic, 85% or something like that. But the faith isn't lived in most parishes. You don't have the dynamics that many Catholics would take for granted in the US in some beautiful parishes. We don't have the dynamics of a large traditional movement. We're very small here, and these movements, these dynamics help grow the faith, help keep it in balance, help challenge people. Whereas in Ireland, we're way behind, and this is the sad reality. And
with with the growing divide within the church itself, I imagine that's getting much worse for you and for the faith there.
Yeah, we had a Jesuit come here last week and tell us that, to get ready for gay blessings, to get ready for women priests, women deacons.
Wow.
And this is the synodal path. I have it on my channel, so it's not like people can just go and listen to his actual words. Don't listen to what I'm saying here. This is what the Jesuit told us, and he's not alone. There's others in his, that say, look, the church is becoming a democracy, and it'll be, the spirit of the age is going to drive forward.
What exactly is the sense of the faithful in Ireland then? I mean, clearly, when I say sense of the faithful, I don't mean of all the Catholics that are there, but of those who are faithful to the church, who are faithful to the traditions, because, tradition does not change. What is the sense of the faithful there? Are they kind of just keep your head down and I'm just going to go to Mass and try to survive and be Catholic and die Catholic and raise my kids Catholic? Or is there kind of a fighting spirit? Like in America, we have the Fighting Irish and Notre Dame here in America. And so what is the sense of the faithful there in Ireland?
Yeah, there are lots of really strong groups in Ireland. On both sides, you have a lot in the traditional movement that are well catechized, and you can see and elsewhere now a lot of strong people coming out, especially young men, which really surprised me, really loving digging into their faith and fighting back on that. I mean, we have a prayer group. I won't say where it is on this, but some men we've sent to seminary from there, and we're supporting them, helping them, praying for them, which is important, and really giving that dynamic that's a preparation for their ministry. There's a lot of fight back. I can see it, and that's why I'm saying there's a lot of hope. But from the top down, we don't have a lot of support, and this is where sadly, last year we had that Traditionis Custodes document, and it really saddened me, because what we should be doing is using all the tools we have available to evangelize. And if somebody is nourished by the Novus Ordo, so be it. If somebody is nourished by traditional Mass, so be it. Let all of that dynamic work in the church and let's get together and stop dividing us. But that there seems to be a lack of will from the top to give us support to us, and that's okay. Look, at the end of the day, we are the church. You're my baptized brothers. We are the church. We can live the faith. We can preach the faith. We can help priests and religious, and understand, it's up to us to give leadership. It's up to you to give leadership. And that's what's vital at the moment. And people are listening to that. They're reaching out to me. And so once we start giving leadership, the Holy Spirit will move hearts, and we just have to let this beautiful faith revitalize.
We only have a couple minutes left. Is there a sense of grieving, of loss, of mourning, so to speak, from the hierarchy there in Ireland about the state of Ireland these days?
If there is, I haven't heard it voiced by them, except for the last bishop of Galway who was installed, and he gave a very pessimistic homily when he was installed. You'll find it there. I mean, the facts speak for themselves. If you go to a Mass here, I'm the young person.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear it, my friend.
And I bring my children, because I'm bringing my children I bring my children to the Novus Ordo and to Society St. Pius X traditional Latin Mass, so they can get a broad view. Look, this is the church, understand both sides. And they would say, well, Daddy, there's nobody of my peers at a Novus Ordo. Whereas if they go to Society Mass, you'll have 20 boys the same age. And my question is to the church, can we not learn? Can we not introduce our children to love the sacred? Mm-hmm. It's done in Huntsville, Alabama. If people go to Mother and Child, and it's done in the Novus Ordo. Can't we do this? Can't we start engaging?
From a strategic standpoint, if all that's your motivation was strategy, I would have mandated every suburban Catholic parish to say a TLM every Sunday. It would have filled the parking lots. It would have brought everybody back and filled the coffers.
It'd be nice too, not to travel so far.
I mean, how many trads were like, if I could not have to drive an hour at $6 a gallon of gas? Good grief. Well, we're almost out of time here with Mr. Robert Nugent, Decree V, determined to be Catholic. What's the best way to connect with you? Is it through your YouTube?
Yeah, if they reach out through my YouTube channel, they'll be able to go to About. They'll find my email there. The channel is set up to support other bloggers in Ireland. So it's any of the funding that they're sending me, we're buying laptops and equipment for other people to laity. So it's pure frustration. I'm doing this out of pure frustration to get to drive forward a conversation in the church. So if people want to help with me and reach out, I'd be more than helpful. But I personally don't need the money. Thank God has looked after me. But I do want other Catholics that I know to have the tools available to start preaching the faith. So that's the inspiration for the channel.
Yeah, praise be God. I've been enjoying it. Decree V, determined to be Catholic on YouTube. Robert, let me give you the opportunity to clarify some fake news that we were passing around. So we were intentionally misleading the audience.
Hey, it happens.
And then the New York Times called, and we thought we better get Robert back on quickly. So I confused. I mixed up some of the information you were sharing in the dates.
That's okay. So I suppose when you're preparing these things in Ireland, you take for granted that people know what, because the images there, people celebrating, were so famous back in 2018, 26th of May 2018, the day after the abortion referendum, where people did celebrate abortion. So they came out, they celebrated the fact that you could have an abortion.
Yeah.
4 years later, we're reflecting back on that date. So this is May. Well, it was May when it happened, in the month of Mary. And we're reflecting back on the legacy of that. And the legacy is abortions went up from 2,000 a year to 6,000 a year. So 6,666 in that first year that it was legislated for.
Insane.
And, it's, I suppose, for your audience in America, this was a popular vote. And people celebrated. So we often hear that it's rare, safe, and legal, and so forth. Our Archbishop, the Primate of Ireland, guys, the Primate of Ireland, on that day that video was done, he came out and said to the pro-life movement that we have to ensure that the legislation that was passed allowed for abortion that was rare, safe, and legal. That's what our Primate or Archbishop actually said verbatim.
Which is horrible.
Guys, he later corrected himself and retracted himself, but our national broadcaster had the soundbite. Look, the Archbishop is asking for legislation for abortion that's rare, safe, and legal. I mean, where could we go?
That's
so
crazy.
tone deaf.
You know, I was during the second hour of the show, whenever you came off, I had just ran into this article, and I was curious if you were familiar with this happening. On May 24th, this article came out from the TFP. 510 public rosary rallies burst into the public square across Ireland. So they had 510 public rosary rallies on May 14th. Were you familiar with that happening across Ireland? And tell me about it.
Yeah, no. So this is a phenomenon that started over the last year, and we try to do them every first Saturday. And the last December, I was up in Belfast, and we had a public rally. So there was 100 of us, 100 men in the square in Belfast, all kneeling, praying the rosary. And it was Christmas shopping time. People were walking by; they couldn't really understand. So it's an amazing phenomenon, like to see so many men making reparation for abortion, making reparation for the harm we've done to women, other men that have done to women. And I actually put the video up on my channel, and somebody was commenting on it. How much did you pay for these men to come and pray? And
I mean, can you blame them? I mean, it seems like you'd almost have to do that these days to get men to come out to do stuff. But
no, but it's grown in awareness, because men see, no, I'm not alone. I'm not the only guy praying the rosary. There are other men that believe. We have to give public witness of our faith. And it has, and this is where it's important, guys. You're laymen. You have to be leaders and give public witness of the faith to your children, to your peers, to society, and say, look, we're not a minority. We do believe this faith means something to us, and this is what we have to do in Ireland. We have a public rosary here every evening at 7 p.m. in front of our church in where we live, and it used to be in the chapel, but during COVID they moved it out, so it's outside. But look,
that's actually a blessing. Doing rosary rallies and praying the rosary in the church is a grace, and there is indulgences attached to doing rosaries in church, but there is something unique about public square rosary rallies, because like you said, it gives public witness, it gives public reparation, and it lets people know that you're not alone. And I've noticed that a lot in the social media, that what they have succeeded in doing is siloing people, and so that way they start censoring people who have good opinions, and so everybody thinks they're alone in the world. And so these public square rosary rallies really show that, one, we're not alone. And Mr. Murphy with the Ireland Needs Fatima, he actually made me my rosary that I took with me. I was a Dominican friar for a brief period, and he actually is the one who made me my rosary. So I have a great love for the TFP, especially TFP in Ireland, TFP all over the world. But they're a great group organization who gives public witness. And during June, which I don't know, is June Pride Month in Ireland?
Yeah, it's Pride Month everywhere, isn't it? No, it's global.
Is it global? Okay, phenomenon. I wasn't sure if it was just an American thing, or did we export it? Yeah, global.
I know Catholic Joe Biden really wants it to be Pride Month everywhere, and he's doing his best to export that to the planet.
Yeah, for sure.
So thanks for that, Catholic Joe Biden. Hey, Mary Bose, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Leticia, good morning to you. Thanks for being on with us today. Praise be to God. Good to see you guys. And Sky Baker, I got to say, I really love the new handle. Sky Baker, way better. Praise be to God. Good morning to you. And it was, okay, Sky, Skyland, is it your parents that are about to celebrate 21 years? Just want a clarification.
I think it is.
I think it is.
Mr. Nugent, I have a question. So one of the things that I found super fascinating the last time I was in Ireland, we spent a lot of time in the northern part. And we have some family, friends who live there. And one of the fascinating things that they told us about were the Troubles, the Troubles that happened in the, I believe it was the late 60s or early 70s. And it was a couple of Catholics, I think it was 12 Catholics, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that were killed who were peacefully protesting in Derry.
Yeah.
And I was thinking just now, obviously there's no one particular thing that is plaguing the church. Actually, there's a couple of different things. But I was thinking, one of the features of the Troubles, at least from an outside perspective, was that it was between Catholics and Protestants. And I'm wondering if you think that sort of religious violence, because there was a lot of religious violence, retaliation, tit-for-tat attacks, do you think that diminished the faith of some of the Irish people in the island?
No, it didn't. The Troubles really had nothing to do with increase or decrease in faith. Because what we've seen since the Troubles ended, since the Good Friday Agreement in the late 1990s, is our so-called Republicans. These are Catholics. Republican Catholics, they've really abandoned the faith. They've abandoned on all fronts, on abortion, on euthanasia, family values, and a whole other areas. And now, if you're in Northern Ireland, if you're a Catholic in Northern Ireland, and this is well known, if you're a Catholic in Northern Ireland and you're looking to vote for a candidate that has the values that you espouse, you will probably end up voting for Protestant candidate.
Wow.
And this isn't an isolated, I don't live in Northern Ireland, I live in the South, but there are many good Catholics that I do know that'll say, look, we have no option now but to vote for a Protestant candidate, a unionist candidate who doesn't, who wants to maintain the status quo. And we saw during the lockdown, guys, we had a First Minister in Northern Ireland. She was a Protestant. She ensured that worship was allowed to continue in churches around Ireland. Whereas in down south, it was completely locked down. So in 2021, we couldn't have Easter Vigil, Easter Mass in the Republic of Ireland. We'd had to go to Northern Ireland to have Mass.
That's crazy.
Do you know, it's a bizarre world we live in, guys, and our so-called Catholic politicians, they went and they participated in the Muslim end of their Ramadan. They had an outdoor service in a big football stadium, and all the politicians came together. I've no problem with that, you know, if people want to help them. But where was the support for Catholics who wanted an Easter Vigil Mass or an Easter Mass?
Right.
It wasn't, you know.
Yeah. We had no Mass in 2020 for Easter Sunday, no public Mass anyway, and it was the most heart-wrenching, depressing day I've had in a very long time. I was literally crying while we have a home chapel. We built a home chapel, so we had set up the television on the family altar so that we could be there. We dressed up and the whole 9 yards, and I'm just crying, and my kids are like, "What is wrong with Dad?" I'm just like,
you'll understand when you're older.
This is so tragic and heart-wrenching, and I end up, you know, well, a lot changed as a result of that moment. I no longer go back to that church that closed its doors, that locked its doors. I moved churches as a result of that, and I told the pastor why. I'm like, "You locked your church," but I was supposed to.
Yeah, Mr. Nugent, we had a similar experience too. That we didn't have Easter, and the only place that was open was the Society Chapel. So we ended up going there. And it was a very eye-opening experience. It certainly softened my perspective on the society. But it's pretty wild.
We had one priest, and he never closed his doors at all in Ireland. So he kept the church open. And his own parishioners ratted him out to the police here.
That's horrible.
And they came
goodness.
They came and arrested him because and it wasn't like the chapel was packed. He said, "Look, I'm just going to leave the chapel open." And he said during the first wave of lockdown, nobody was coming. So he was just saying Mass on his own. And then suddenly, you know, an odd woman or a few women might come in and they'd space out in the church. And he just left the door open. It wasn't packed. He wasn't advertising it or doing anything. He just said, "I'm leaving the door open." And they ratted him out for 10 women going to Mass in a massive chapel that was practically empty. That's how bad. Yeah.
Could you, sorry, Joe, do you mind telling us the stories about the Mass rocks in Ireland?
Yeah, so I mean, during penal times, as people know the history, Catholic Mass was outlawed. There was a dissolution of the monasteries in both Ireland and the UK. So all of the monasteries were closed, all of the Catholic properties were appropriated. And so priests had to go abroad, be formed as priests, and come back to Ireland. And the only place you could say Mass was on these Mass rocks, which was, you know, word of mouth. People would come say Mass. And if you come to Mass even today in Ireland, there's a lot of that tradition is held in Ireland because Irish don't sing, silent Irish and so forth, and a lot of that comes from that time during Mass rocks where you simply couldn't sing. All of the ceremony was held in silence. Obviously the Mass was mostly silent anyway, and you know, there's a lot of priests were killed during that time. Ireland is one of the most strange Catholic countries in Europe. We don't have canonized saints from that period hardly at all, because there's very little recorded of priests and those that give up their life during the penal times. So there's a Mass rock near where I am. I'll go and do a video for you all, and I'll send it to you so you can see what it looks like today.
Oh yeah, we'd love that.
But I have to say, you've been living it in Ireland, and what could be more bizarre than to say that in Ireland they've got a below ground Catholic church?
Yeah, and we literally did have a below ground Catholic church. It's very hard, and it's very hard that I can't say more about it or put a video on it. But it was very beautiful as well. You know, we never thought that we would be in a situation where we would have to be calling around priests and making sure that the police weren't around. And, you know, because if police were around, well, we couldn't travel. It was, you know, we couldn't go 5 kilometers from our house. You know, so it was so sad what we saw. And the saddest thing, guys, is the priests kind of divided themselves, because it was the priests that had faith and the priests that you know, I don't want to, I'm afraid, you know, and when a priest is afraid, you'd wonder, what faith do you have? Because
Right.
you've given your life to Christ, you know. And I had two priests that I know died of COVID. They were Legionaries of Christ in Mexico, and they weren't old, but they, you know, they continued to work and minister, and fair play to them for giving their life to their mission. What is the alternative a priest has if he's not giving his life to the people that he is supposed to pastor? And I got a lot of criticism from priests for calling them out, but you know, that if I'm father of family and somebody's going to break into my house and come up,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Yes.
I'm not going to roll over and say
Yeah.
to my wife, get down there, you know.
Yeah.
You man up and you say,
Yeah.
look, I'm responsible for this, and
Exactly.
and you know, but it's the sad thing is they don't understand the power of the Eucharist, you know, the power the Eucharist has in people's lives. But
Or the power of fatherhood. I had this conversation with Bishop Strickland from the Tyler Diocese on the radio on more than one occasion, like the day after he locked his own parishes. I said to him on my radio show, Bishop, if I locked my doors to my kids, what kind of a father would that make me? And he gets it. He gets it. He didn't duck the question or what he didn't refuse to take my phone calls after. I mean, he understands that this is a crisis of fatherhood. Fathers don't treat their kids that way, period.
Yeah. I mean, and what I couldn't understand was when the lockdown was originally organized, they were renting out one priest in Ireland said, look, I'm going to use the car park in my church. Everybody come in their cars. I'm going to say mass outside, and you don't have to mix. And they wouldn't even let him do that.
Right.
Even though you know,
Explain
I'm
that
just
to
saying
me.
that, you know.
Bizarre. I mean, and everybody, you know, they would say, oh, but there's a precedent, you know. Even in America, during the Spanish flu, churches did close down. I mean, there was an article that was being passed around. I get that there's a precedent or whatever. And they would bring up, you know, the bishop in Italy, the saint whose name is escaping me all of a sudden. What's his name? The saint from Milan?
Mr. Robert,
A Congal?
what are you doing? What is
No,
your
a dog. Congal.
what's going on for the month of the Sacred Heart in Ireland? Are there any celebrations or traditions that happen in Ireland for the Sacred Heart?
No, not that I'm aware of. I don't remember anything during that month. The Sacred Heart used to have pride of place in all homes in Ireland. I remember when I was a child, you'd always see a beautiful picture of the Sacred Heart, and I have purchased one. It's a very large one. I have it in the hall. But no, we don't. Not that I'm aware of. There's no special tradition this month. May we used to have lots of altars for Mary, for May, and rosaries, and that was very traditional. But not that I'm aware of now. Maybe somebody will call me out for being ignorant and not knowing what I should know. But not that I remember from a child anyway.
We'll have to reclaim some old traditions or adopt. I like being American Catholic because we can just take different traditions that are all over the world and be like, all right, this is ours now.
Yeah.
We're going to start doing this.
We get to steal it
That's
from
my favorite
everybody.
thing about being American Catholic.
Well, God bless you. Thank you again for hanging out with us today. We really appreciate you. And once again, you should check out his YouTube channel, Decrevi, Determined to be Catholic, on YouTube. And if you're going to make a Via Compostela journey, maybe hook up and go along for the walk. That'd be amazing. But that is going to do it for the radio side of our show. Praise be to Jesus. Let's pray for Ireland, Poland, Portugal, all these traditionally Catholic countries. France, sorry, France, put a fork in you. You've been done for centuries. You've been dead.